The battlefield smelled of scorched alloy and the sour sting of plasma gas, a kind of perfume no one ever got used to. Human troopers lay scattered in their armor, machines half sunk into the mud like forgotten toys, the night sky broken open by the glow of wreckage burning its way back into the earth. Private Kieran Holt crouched behind the twisted frame of a fallen drone tank, his rifle humming low, its energy cell down to 3 desperate shots. He pressed a gloved hand against his helmet, trying to tune out the calm static, but all that came through was noise and the occasional scream. Somewhere high above, the fleet was abandoning this sector, leaving the ground forces to their luck. Kieran laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh one made when the alternative was panic. "Lucky me," he muttered, ducking as another streak of plasma hissed overhead. He'd been separated from his unit hours ago, or maybe minutes. It was impossible to tell in the chaos. His visor display flickered in protest every time he tried to check coordinates, and the voice recognition system kept insisting it couldn't understand his accent. "Great," he grumbled. "My helmet's more confused than I am." He slapped the side of it, which earned him nothing but static louder than before. Then he heard it, not the sharp cry of human agony, not the mechanical shriek of burning alloys, but something softer. A voice, strained, melodic, and distinctly not human. He almost ignored it. War zones were full of strange sounds, and chasing them was how one usually got vaporized. But something in the tone, less pain, more plea, pulled him forward. Kieran tightened his grip on his rifle, muttering the sort of pep talk soldiers gave themselves in bad moments. "All right, Holt, either you're about to make first contact or get yourself vaporized. Place your bets, gentlemen." The gentlemen in this case were 3 fallen comrades who weren't answering back. He sighed, shook his head, and crawled out from behind the tank. The source of the sound was not far, tucked in the shadows of a half-collapsed shuttle. Its silver hull reflected the light of distant fire like broken mirrors, and at its edge lay a figure. Human at first glance. Slender frame, tangled dark hair clinging to pale skin dusted with ash. But as he edged closer, Kieran saw the differences. Ears that stretched long and sharp, twitching faintly as though catching signals from another universe. Eyes when they snapped open, that shone in the dim with liquid silver, glowing faintly as if lit from within. He froze. She didn't. Instead, the alien girl tried to sit up, grimaced, and immediately toppled sideways again. "Stay back," she hissed, though her voice cracked halfway through. The sound was strangely melodic, the words heavily accented but clear enough. She raised a trembling hand, and for a moment Kieran thought she might unleash some terrible alien power. Instead, she just slumped forward, the hand dropping uselessly to the dirt. Kieran exhaled and muttered to himself, "Of course. First alien encounter and she's about 2 breaths away from passing out. Perfect." He knelt beside her, setting his rifle down but keeping one hand near it. Her breathing was shallow, a wound scorched across her side glowing faintly from plasma burn. He rummaged through his kit and pulled out a field stim. "Listen, Long Years, you're either gonna let me patch you up, or you're gonna die here and ruin my night. Personally, I'd rather not explain to command why I let the first alien I ever met bleed out in front of me." Her ears twitched at the nickname. She blinked at him, clearly confused, then whispered something that might have been a curse. He pressed the stem to her wound anyway, and the hiss of the injection filled the air. She flinched, tried to swat him weakly, then gave up with a groan. "You talk too much," she murmured. "Yeah, I get that a lot," Kieran replied, injecting a second stim. "I've got reviews from at least 3 ex-girlfriends confirming it." Her silver eyes narrowed, and he realized, was that a smirk? Hard to tell through the pain, but he swore the corner of her mouth curved. Then she fainted. For a moment, Kieran just knelt there, listening to the distant screams and explosions. He could leave her. Probably should. Carrying an alien through a battlefield was an excellent way to get shot by both sides. But there was something absurd about it all. Him, crouched in the mud, making bad jokes at an unconscious alien with ears sharp enough to cut paper. He slung his rifle, adjusted his grip, and muttered, "You're gonna owe me for this, long ears. Drinks at least. Assuming you people have drinks. If it's some kind of glowing slime, I'm not touching it." He hauled her up onto his shoulder, staggering under her weight. She was lighter than he expected, but every step jarred his aching body. The comm still spat useless static, the visor still blinked coordinates that made no sense, and the battlefield still roared with chaos. But as he trudged toward the only direction that looked less on fire, he felt the faint rise and fall of her breathing against him. It was enough. The sky above cracked with thunder as orbital debris rained down, each streak of fire a reminder of how close death hovered. Kieran adjusted her again, grunted, and muttered through clenched teeth, "Next time, Holt, when someone says volunteer for reconnaissance, just say no. No aliens, no plasma burns, no hauling silver-eyed strangers across a war zone." He glanced down at her, unconscious but alive, and allowed himself the smallest grin. "Still," he whispered, "you're not half bad company." And with that, he kept walking into the burning dark, unaware that the moment would etch itself into both their lives, long after the war forgot their names. The orbital station creaked like an old ship trying to remember it was made of steel and not wood. Kieran Holt leaned against a bulkhead that vibrated faintly every time a docking clamp engaged, sipping from a dented flask that definitely didn't contain regulation water. The years had not been kind to him, though he'd argue he hadn't been particularly kind to them either. His uniform was long gone, replaced by patched civilian gear that smelled faintly of recycled air and grease. He had retired, or at least the army had retired him, and now he drifted between jobs that required more sarcasm than skill. The station was crowded that day, diplomats streaming in from every direction, merchants hawking wares that looked suspiciously illegal, and humans bumping shoulders with aliens whose anatomy Kieran still hadn't figured out. One of them had 3 eyes stacked vertically. Another had a carapace that clicked every time they spoke. Kieran made a note to never play cards with that one. "Can't trust a poker face when the face is a shell," he muttered, earning a look from a passing dockworker who clearly thought he was talking to himself. He raised the flask in salute. He was halfway through debating whether to find food or a quieter corner when he saw her. Not a ghost, not a trick of the station's shifting lights, but her, standing at the far end of the promenade as if the universe had decided subtlety was overrated. Silver eyes unmistakable. Long ears, still twitching slightly, though now adorned with small metallic cuffs that glimmered like jewelry. Her bearing was different. No longer the wounded girl he had carried through mud and fire, but a poised envoy draped in attire that marked her as official, dangerous, or both. Kieran blinked, rubbed his eyes, then muttered, "Of course. You save someone once in a war zone and the universe just can't let you move on. Figures." She saw him too. Her expression shifted, shock first, then something unreadable, then a smile so small he almost thought he imagined it. She stepped forward, her attendants falling back with the precision of trained guards. He considered bolting. He also considered pretending he didn't recognize her, though given his mouth, that would last approximately 3 seconds. Instead, he stayed rooted, flask still in hand, like a man waiting for an asteroid to hit and wondering if it would be quick. When she finally reached him, she tilted her head just slightly, ears flicking as if attuning to his silence. "You," she said, just that. Her voice was deeper now, steadier, but the cadence was the same. "Me," Kieran replied, raising the flask. "Still alive against all odds. Shocking, I know." Her lips curved into that same almost smile he remembered. "You look older." "Well, first words after all these years and you go straight for the jugular. You've been practicing human humor, haven't you?" She arched a brow. "I recall you joked even while bleeding. I thought it was required for your kind." "It is," he said, deadpan. "Mandatory course at basic training. How to make bad jokes while dying 101. I passed with honors." Her laugh was quiet but real, and he felt something in his chest shift, like an old scar pulling taut. The station noise faded around them, diplomats arguing in a dozen languages becoming background static. For a moment it was just the two of them, human and alien, years of silence crumbling in the face of shared memory. Then her guards cleared their throats in unison, the universal signal for stop flirting in public. She straightened, her voice more formal now. "We are here for negotiations. I did not expect to find you." "Yeah, I wasn't exactly planning to crash your diplomatic mission either," Kieran said. "Mostly here for cheap drinks and questionable life choices." One of her guards muttered something in her language, sharp and clipped. She responded with a flick of her ear that made the guard step back, though the glare remained. Kieran smirked. "Still terrifying, I see. Good to know some things don't change." She studied him a moment longer, as if trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the memory she carried. "Why are you here, really?" He shrugged. "Work, odd jobs, trying not to get shot, failing occasionally." Her silver eyes narrowed. "Still reckless. Still alive," he countered. "That's gotta count for something." The tension broke again with her laugh, sharper this time. The guards shifted uneasily, unused to seeing her soften. She ignored them. "Perhaps," she said softly, "you will tell me more of your questionable life choices. Later." Kieran raised his flask in mock salute. "Later sounds promising, assuming your guards don't vaporize me first." Her ears twitched, the alien equivalent of a smile, and then she was swept away by protocol, guards, and the tide of negotiations. Kieran stood there a long while, flask forgotten in his hand, wondering if the universe really was as chaotic as it seemed, or if it simply enjoyed watching him trip over the same silver-eyed complication twice in a lifetime. As he finally moved on, weaving through the crowd, he muttered to himself, "Well, Holt, guess you're back in the business of bad ideas. And this one's got long ears and better posture than you'll ever have." He grinned despite himself, the creak of the station around him sounding a little less hollow than it had an hour before. The drift was less a place and more a graveyard stitched together by gravity and bad luck. Thousands of wrecked ships, human, alien, and everything in between, hung in an endless belt around a dying star, creaking and drifting like bones in orbit. Pilots swore it was cursed, scavengers swore it was profitable, and Kieran swore it was the single worst decision he'd ever made, which was saying a lot. "Remind me," he said as their shuttle shuddered past the torn hull of what had once been a battleship, "why did I agree to this? Was I drunk, or just incredibly stupid?" "You volunteered," she said, fingers dancing across alien controls that pulsed faintly like living veins. "I did not force you." "Ah, yes. The classic human reflex, throw yourself into danger to impress the girl. I should have known better." Her silver eyes slid toward him, unblinking. "If your goal is to impress me, you are failing." "Good," Kieran replied, strapping himself tighter as the shuttle tilted sideways to avoid a spinning cargo pod. "Because if I ever start succeeding, the universe will implode." Their shuttle was small, half-human tech welded awkwardly onto alien systems. It hummed in two different frequencies at once, which made Kieran's teeth ache. She handled the controls effortlessly, ears twitching as though attuned to vibrations he couldn't hear. He tried not to notice how focused she looked, how different from the wounded girl he once carried through mud and fire. But noticing came as easily as breathing. They were hunting a lead, a fragment of transmission picked up during her delegation's time on the station. Someone was stirring old embers, whispering promises of a new war, and the whispers traced back here, into the drift. Kieran had hoped she'd send guards or a fleet or literally anyone else. Instead, she had chosen him. He still wasn't sure whether to be honored or deeply concerned. The comm crackled suddenly. A voice, distorted, neither human nor alien, muttered through static, coordinates, half-spoken warnings, then silence. Kieran squinted at the display. "That sound like a trap to you?" "Everything here is a trap," she answered calmly. "Excellent, so we're doomed either way. I feel much better." They followed the coordinates into the skeletal remains of a freighter large enough to swallow their shuttle. Its outer hull was split wide open, jagged metal like teeth waiting to chew them up. Inside, "Look at that," he said, pointing with the end of a protein bar. All menacing, all cryptic, couldn't even invest in better graphics. You'd think a shadowy conspiracy would splurge on high-resolution holograms. She ignored his commentary, ears twitching as she studied the projection. The voice was layered, artificially. It hides identity, but it also signals collaboration, multiple species. "So, you're saying our Mystery Doom Club is inclusive. Nice to know they're progressive about their recruitment policies." Her silver eyes flicked to him, unimpressed. "This is serious." "It's always serious," Kieran muttered, taking a bite of the bar. "That's the problem. Wars don't end. They just take naps until someone comes along to poke them with a stick." She didn't argue, which worried him more than if she had. Instead, she gestured at the console. Alien glyphs shimmered, overlaying human encryption codes. It was a map of sorts, routes traced across sectors, converging on a single point. A supply hub orbiting a gas giant, officially abandoned years ago. "There," she said. "If they are building toward conflict, it begins there." Kieran sighed. "Of course it does. Middle of nowhere, creepy abandoned hub, probably full of automated turrets and things that want to eat me. Why not?" Still, when she began preparing the shuttle for departure, he didn't stop her. Somewhere between dragging her out of a battlefield years ago and stumbling into conspiracies now, his life had stopped being his own. Or maybe he just liked her company more than he admitted. The hub was worse than expected. They dropped out of Slipstream to find it circling the gas giant like a bloated corpse, its hull pitted and scorched, lights flickering faintly as though the station itself wasn't sure if it wanted to stay alive. "Cheery place," Kieran said as they approached. "Really feels like home, if home had a permanent power outage and a lingering death wish." She adjusted the controls with a calm precision that made him nervous. "Docking clamps are still operational. That is not normal." "Right," Kieran said, checking his rifle. "So the haunted space station isn't just haunted, it's also suspicious. I feel better already." The docking clamps seized their shuttle with a jarring shudder, dragging them into the station's skeletal hangar. The airlock hissed open, stale oxygen flooding in. They stepped out cautiously, boots echoing in the cavernous space. Lights flickered on overhead in sequence, one by one like someone rolling out a red carpet for doom. "Yep," Kieran muttered. "Definitely an ambush." They advanced anyway. The corridors were strangely clean, too clean for a station supposedly abandoned. Panels gleamed, consoles hummed with quiet power. The deeper they went, the more obvious it became that someone had been living here, or many someones. She paused at a door, tracing alien script etched into its frame. "This is not human." Kieran tilted his head. "Let me guess, not your people either." Her ears twitched, older, from the ones who came before. "Fantastic," he said, "because nothing spices up a potential conspiracy like ancient mystery aliens." The door slid open, revealing a command chamber filled with holographic displays. Ships, lots of ships, hovered in miniature projection. Human designs mixed with alien craft, all marked with red sigils. At the center of the display was the same faceless figure from before, repeating its mantra, "The war will wake." Kieran rubbed his temples. "Do these guys charge royalties every time they say that? Because I'm starting to get bored." Before she could reply, the projection shifted, not pre-recorded this time, live. The faceless figure turned toward them, voice warbling through layers. "You should not be here." Kieran raised a hand. "Hi, yeah, we keep hearing that, just terrible at following instructions." The figure ignored him. "You are relics of a dying piece. Step aside and you may live to see its ashes." "Wow," Kieran said. "You rehearsed that, didn't you? Very dramatic, a little too dramatic if I'm honest." The room shook suddenly as defense drones dropped from hidden alcoves, eyes glowing crimson like the swarm they'd faced before. She raised her weapon, calm as always. We cannot stay. No argument here, Kieran said, firing as the first drone lunged. Though I'd appreciate if next time we stumble into a death cult, you'd let me stay on the shuttle. They fought their way back through the corridors, blasts of energy lighting up the sterile halls. Kieran's rifle overheated, forcing him to hurl it at one drone while pulling a sidearm. She moved with eerie precision, every shot clean, every motion controlled. He, on the other hand, tripped over a power conduit, barely avoiding being skewered. "Smooth," she said, not even out of breath. "Hey," he panted, "style points don't count in survival." They burst back into the hangar, sprinting for the shuttle. Drones swarmed behind them, metallic claws scraping against the deck. Kieran fired wildly over his shoulder, shouting, "Go, go, go." The shuttle's engines roared to life as they leapt inside. She slammed controls, disengaging the clamps. The ship lurched free just as the hangar exploded in a wave of fire, drones shredded in the blast. They shot back into the void, the gas giant's pale light washing over their battered shuttle. For a long moment, silence. Then Kieran slumped into his seat, chest heaving. "Well, that went about as well as expected." She glanced at him, silver eyes steady. "You are hurt." "Just a scratch," he said, though his sleeve was smoking slightly. "Adds character. Besides, chicks dig scars." Her ears twitched, the alien version of a smirk. "I am not certain that is true." "It's true," he insisted, wincing. "Trust me. I read it in a very unreliable magazine once." Despite the chaos, despite the lingering echo of threats in the void, laughter, quiet, reluctant, escaped her lips. And in that sound, Kieran felt something steady against the storm, something worth holding onto, even as the shadows of war crept closer. The gas giant boiled below them, its storms twisting like living things, and above its churning atmosphere the final confrontation waited. The fleet that was never supposed to exist drifted out from the shadows. Warships patched together from human and alien wrecks, hulls scarred but engines glowing. Every vessel bore the same red sigil. It wasn't a fleet built to last. It was built to strike, to reignite a war the galaxy was still trying to forget. Kieran leaned forward in his seat, staring at the projections lighting up their shuttle. "Well," he said, "I was hoping for maybe 3 enemy ships, 4 tops. This feels excessive." She studied the display, calm even as her ears twitched with tension. "They mean to make a statement, to prove they can strike both sides." "Yeah, well, they're making one statement too many. What's the plan?" Her silver eyes turned to him. "You always ask that, yet you never wait for an answer before running forward." "Hey, it's called consistency," Kieran said, checking the charge on his rifle. "I'm very reliable in my stupidity." The shuttle slipped closer, hidden in the blind spot of the drifting wrecks. Through gaps in the fleet, the central command ship loomed, a monstrous fusion of human battleship and alien dreadnought, bristling with weapons. It pulsed with a sickly red glow. "That's the heart," she said. "We cut it out, the rest will scatter." "Good," Kieran muttered. "I always wanted to fight a giant Frankenship with delusions of grandeur." They docked on a maintenance ring, slipping past the patrols. The corridors inside were alive with the hum of mismatched machinery, lights stuttering between alien hues and human fluorescence. Guards in composite armor patrolled the halls, faces hidden. They fought their way through, side by side, her shots precise, his messy but effective. At the core of the ship they found it. The faceless figure waiting, its hologram now fused to a towering machine. Layers of voices spilled out in unison. "You cannot stop this. The war is inevitable." Kieran raised his weapon. "Inevitable's overrated. You ever try pizza?" "That's inevitable. War's just lazy." The machine unleashed drones, but they were ready. She surged forward, her weapon singing with alien light, cutting through wave after wave. Kieran fought at her side, every near miss answered with a